Good elevator music to TF too.
Right, looks like it's about.
Let's look, it's live. So,
And we get to go.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, excellent. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, one and all, to the first major panel of this entire convention here, the TF Writers panel. We're going to end up talking about a lot of our different processes, as what we enjoy in the form of writing, etc. Just going through the introductions here. Hi, I'm Agent. I tend to end up specializing a lot in characterization and general thematic approaches to the genre in general. I'll pass you along over to Derek next.
Me? Weird to call us a major panel when we're just 6 people who like to write. I'm Derek. I tend to focus on kinky stuff. So pretty much all those kinks like vor, transformation, inanimate, and lots of gay stuff. So you'll hear a lot from me about seeing things that way, about the kink perspective. Next is Gabe.
Hi, I'm GabrielMoon. I've been writing TF since 2016 and writing as a full-time job since 2020. I tend to focus more on animal and anthro TFs with a strong interest in gay themes, anatomy, detailed anatomy, introspection, bit of body horror thrown in. And yeah, I guess Geo's next.
Hi, I am Geo Holmes, a raccoon from the internet. I tend to do like TF with some quirky sensibilities and humor kind of deal, ranging from animal to inanimate stuff. Been writing for a good while, always like playing with silly sensibilities kind of deal. A lot of my work these days has been collaborative work done with a fellow Fox kind of deal, where we just collaborate and write TF stories together. And speaking of which, that brings us to Lappy.
hi, I'm the fellow Fox. I enjoy writing transformation in all forms, but primarily in this kind of silly sensibility kind of thing where everything's just kind of wacky, and I kind of don't know where it'll go when we start writing it, and then it just winds up where it does. But I also write some transformation poetry. You may have seen that online. But yeah. So I believe with that, it next goes to Orca over here.
Hi. Sorry, I just woke up, so this is gonna be a bit scuffed. But hello, I'm Squeaky Orca. Like Derek, I'm more of a kinky focused writer. I write a lot of transformation with hypnosis, lots of gay themes, lots of bad ends, stuff like that. I focus a lot on like latex rubber and bondage and all that kind of fun stuff. And yeah, it's cool to be here.
Yeah, so those are our six. Those are our 6 writers here. I'm also included for some reason, so I'm looking forward to all this here.
It's actually kind of cool. We all have a really different spread.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's part of the thing about the writer. There's so many end up taking the entire themes. If we just even form go in hundreds from start to finish, really.
Yeah, go ahead, Gio.
Oh, I was going to say that is very true. Like the amount of ways you can do any given TF, it's really intriguing kind of deal, depending on tone and characters and everything. Like there's a lot of dog TF, for instance, but gosh, there's so many variety of ways that could be played out kind of deal, just individually, whether it be just on breed, whether it be on tone, whether it be just like what you focus on kind of deal. It's kind of like the coolest part about TF is the ways you can explore it in writing.
Yeah, one of the things that I kind of like to think about is that a lot of fun TF tropes can be essentially horror tropes that are played for laughs, because it kind of makes sense. You think about all these, movies where it's like, oh no, they're turning into a donkey, how awful. And then it's like, yeah, but I mean, think about it. That's kind of cool, right?
Awful in quotation
Yeah.
marks.
Yeah, that's a bad end. Oh no, how awful. No, not that.
What?
Well, bad end's all a matter of perspective, really, kind of deal. I mean,
Exactly.
I tend to then end with the vague, eventually kind of deal, but isn't that kind of just a bad end with a different spin kind of deal?
Yeah, one thing I like.
Yeah, sometimes it's fun just to kind of leave it. Oh, sorry.
One thing I like about these stories is that it kind of lets you explore endings that aren't typically done in like mainstream media. You get to kind of see the thing. Well, like it was kind of like hinted at that a bad end could have happened in this story, but then you actually get to play out the bad end itself and see what would have actually happened. So.
Yeah, looking into the mechanics of that sort of thing is always very fascinating to me. Like, there's a number of things that goes right there. Can they be cured? Is there even a cure? Do they want to be cured? Like,
No, they don't want to be
I
cured.
know in a lot of cases. Oh, but yeah, I know in a. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, I know in a lot of cases, depending on what the writer's going for, they may not. They may want to keep it vague, or may want the reader to kind of decide their own sort of story. And I think that's one of the reasons I got into writing. It's like, okay, this is something that someone else has done, but I have this idea. This is missing here. I want to put my 2 cents forward and try to add sort of my own take to what's missing. And it's kind of the really cool thing about writing, because it's like, as many people do that, the more people do that, the more people get inspired, and the broader the scope of writing that readers get.
so many angles.
Yeah, I'm often writing stories that it's just the thing that I haven't seen someone write yet, and I need to see it with my own eyes. And then someone else writes something that's inspired for that, and you just keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the hallmark of how I even started writing. It was just kind of like, oh, I want to see this. No one's writing this.
Yep. That's what
guess
I was
I'll
going
do
to say. Is like,
Yeah.
how did we all get started? Because I feel like that's how probably several of us did. Is just I need it this specific way. I need it to be exactly like this, and the only way to do that is to write it yourself.
Yeah,
I'll start. I started basically. I came across a bunch of art writers that I really liked their work of, and I wanted to take and put my own spin on it. And ultimately, it kind of wound up in all those writers becoming peers of mine and co-writers for some of them. Hello, Gio. But yeah, it's. I think it's great how this kind of TF writing community has kind of a cyclical nature to it, because everybody just keeps inspiring each other to write more and more things.
Further and further down the metaphorical rabbit hole, or in some cases, literally.
Like, because I mean, I think anyone's been like thinking like, what? There's all this talk about holes in this war story, but there's no actual foxes in here, and then it just goes from there essentially. Every time.
Disappointed.
Yeah, disappointments.
Blatant false advertising.
Like,
I was going to age myself. I keep
Oh.
interrupting people. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I think you were next, actually. Go forth.
Okay. I was going to age myself a little bit with the TSA I discovered in, well, it was archived at that point, but I think 2005. And that really kind of got me into like the scope of sort of what transformation stories could be by the fans. Like you always see like there's tons of transformation in horror novels and children/young adult literature, but then like actually seeing what some of the first people put on the internet to sort of fill that gap was really inspiring. And unfortunately, it took me 10 years to start doing my own after that, but better late than never.
And there's never really any cutoff point for that. I mean, really, a lot of people ended up getting their starts inside the late 2000s, and we got brand new people coming in too.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us got inspired by like, oh, is it the Transformation Story Archive kind of deal? And digging through all those stories and finding like the variety of like different interesting concepts and ideas that kind of grew from there kind of deal.
It's actually cool. I guess in Toronto, a lot of the some of the first Frontal Equinoxes or around there, a lot of the TSA writers, one of them attends regularly. I've gotten to talk to him, and I guess a lot of them used to gather relatively close by. So that was really cool just to actually talk to somebody who knew some of the writers of stories that got me into it.
Yeah, that's cool. I think a lot of my inspiration was a lot of the artists on here that also do transformation stuff. I kind of like, I don't know. I just kind of snuck around for Affinity for a long time on my personal blog, and I was like, I could be part of this world maybe eventually someday. TM. And then I eventually just did. But I've been writing for a long time as well. But it's just actually putting your foot forward and making something, and people will read it and people will comment, and it's great. But that's how I got my start, I guess. Just like being inspired by the artists, and putting those kind of like visuals into words in my imagination. Yeah, it's good.
I mean, it's hard to believe, really. I mean, I've been checking out some of the stuff since like 2012 or so, and coming in a decade later, growing up with some of these artists and other writers, it's astounding, really, to end up seeing how much they've ended up growing, how much we've grown in the past, and how much we will continue growing, ideally, inside the future.
We can almost
Yeah,
say
I'm
we're
really
like
thankful to live in a
TFing.
time.
I was gonna make some joke how we're TFing into better writers and different writers as time goes on. Go ahead.
I'm rolling my
Kidding.
eyes. I'm really grateful to live in a time where we can actually post about these things and have our own space for it. I can only imagine if we didn't have the internet, wouldn't be able to share these kinds of things. Which, talking about sharing things, while I have the stage, tag your work, everyone. Even if you don't think that it's very good, please put tags on things so I can find it. I'm still finding things that people posted that I love, but they didn't tag stuff.
That's good advice.
So,
Yes.
transformation, TF.
On FA, do not use just TF. It has to be transformation because
Oh, it does?
their tag system doesn't tag anything that's less than 3 letters.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Oh.
Anything tagged TF will not get seen by the thing.
Well, I've been
So-
wasting.
Did not
I
know
see
that.
people in the chat saying, if you don't do, I'm going to get you. Yeah, me. I'll
Yeah.
find you and TF you. There's something you don't like.
I mean,
I was going to
be
say,
careful with what you're gonna TF people into, because I see we have a
I-
pro toaster in the audience.
Yeah, I don't know
so-
what
Sure.
I would do. That's gonna be a tough one.
That'd be one of the most. You go ahead.
Yeah. One of the someone had mentioned earlier about feedback and that. I think just as like for budding TF writers or even people who've done it for years, just getting positive feedback is just such a
Yes.
rewarding experience. Even if you don't
Yeah.
think you're that good, if someone else likes you, it's just inspiring. Like giving negative comments is just such a waste. Like I mean, like there's room for constructive criticism, obviously, but like generally when like people are seeking it, it's probably the best time. But yeah, like just positive feedback is I'm sure like all artists can agree. We kind of live off it, like we breathe it. and just
Yeah.
finding a story you like and just leaving a positive comment is just can be all somebody needs to be like, I'm going to write this next thing I was planning because people like this, and it just kind of inspires everybody to create whatever they're able.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah,
point. Like,
it's-
I continue.
Sorry, I was just going to say it's such a simple thing as well, just to leave a small comment, just to say how much you like something, but it can make a huge difference, and I think people don't really realize that. I think it's really important. If you like something, please let the author know. We're hungry for people to speak to us in a way. I feel like
Every
sometimes
time-
writing can be quite lonely sometimes, but with a community, it's really nice, and yeah, I think show your appreciation. People will really appreciate it back.
I think with all artwork and everything like that, we're all basically just kind of screaming into the void, and we're hoping that someone from the void says, "Hey, you really described turning that person into a toaster very well." So
It's true.
Silly thing in the comments, someone's like posting some negative feedback they got. Has anyone gotten like amusing? You would think that posting stuff like what I do, like I've mentioned, I do like a lot of kink stuff and especially weird transformation. You would think I would get negative feedback more often, but I've actually never gotten it. I always kind of wanted some. I wanted someone to be like, "This is like heinous. This is a crime." Never gotten that. So
I've
that was
gotten
kinda
one or
interesting.
two times where someone's been like, "Oh, so they're dead." When
Oh, the
when
"Are
I-
you
when I wrote
okay"
an anime
comment.
TF at some point,
Oh.
and it's like, no, this is a really silly story. I don't know where you got that I would just straight up kill the main character, but okay.
Mm.
I mean,
I
there's a
think
time and place for a murder, but in writing.
And
Yeah, I mean,
I
Yeah.
kind of thought that I've definitely thought about how death relates to transformation. Like, how much can someone really change and be the same person? Like, that's always kind of something that I sort of skirt in my stories a bit. And it is kind of concerning. I think that it's a valid question for someone to ask, like, are they dead? Like, that kind of is a reasonable question in my mind. Although I'm sure it wasn't asked in its good faith. But
Yeah.
it does bring up an interesting question.
yeah, we're getting a lot
Yeah,
of people
I-
commenting on the ship of Theseus right now,
Yeah.
and that's a very good point right there. That's actually a lot of. Sometimes that's a good point right there. How far can you end up pushing the envelope until you're something different? And for that matter, right there, is the new you the real you? That's something important to analyze.
I think largely when we're doing sort of like character death or putting somebody into the mindset of a new form completely, there's always going to be that little bit of a bias because we are unfortunately always writing from a human perspective. So say somebody turns into like a donkey and we try to envision what it would be like to lose their mind, we're still coming at it from a human perspective. So I think it's really hard to do any kind of like true death because there's always that, okay, well, this is how we think a donkey would see the world, but we can never actually know.
Hmm.
We're left constantly imagining.
I see we're getting a lot of questions already and things like that. Do you want to take some audience questions before we go on to other things?
like,
Yeah,
I did see.
Well,
Oh,
I see
go
one I
ahead.
like. How much do you storyify it with developed characters and growth in a plot versus writing out a scenario when someone TFs? Someone want to start with that? Like, how much do you story?
I'll go with this. Usually when Gio and I are writing a story together, we often kind of come up with a kind of a crazy scenario, like what if the TF plot device was some kind of high tech uh, Apple gadget, and it was being on a YouTube tech review show. and then we just kind of go from there. It's like, oh, okay, so now we can introduce some characters who would react to this kind of thing, who would go to, who would want to watch that video, things like that. And so it oftentimes it kind of starts with a TF thing first, and then we kind of focus on characters and getting people to react to it, as opposed to just kind of being here's a person and now there's something else.
Yeah, and sometimes we focus on like the character, because sometimes a character makes the TF more effective. Like for instance, there's a story where we put up this very pretentious and noble knight who has very, very black and white opinions about gnolls and everything kind of deal. And then we present him into a situation where he is TF'd kind of deal. Guess what he TFs into kind of deal.
Yeah, the kind of karma kind of aspect of it. It's pretty good.
Yeah, like it's like the setup and the payoff kind of deal. The setup can make TF more effective and more fun kind of deal to play out.
Yeah, I think characters are a really big part of TF, and having strong characters that you can play around with in ways like that, like the arrogant main character kind of gets his just desserts kind of thing. If you do that well, it can be really satisfying. Yeah, characters are really good for TF. I mean, obviously,
I would
they
say
need to be, but
to take the opposite perspective, I personally like focusing on TF stories and not so much on the characters. I will say, I'm sure we've all encountered this. Maybe a story that has like a great TF scene, but there's the writer clearly spent a while trying to chug through the other aspects of the story when you can tell that they wanted to focus on the TF stuff. I would encourage people to kind of it's okay to rely on like a trope or two just dive right into the TF scene when you're writing. Like, it's totally fine. I sometimes the characters evolve as I'm writing. I'm not even thinking about like the character, but then I start writing the scene that I want to see, and eventually the character kind of comes out of it.
yeah.
Oh,
I
encourage people to not worry so much about the writerly aspects of things.
Mm.
I mean, I mentioned this before, but characters tend to end up being one of my biggest themes inside the stories. I'm not sure if any of you guys have written what I write, but I tend to end up going for primarily reoccurring characters. Most prominently, might end up hearing about about Vanessa, the cosmic witch beyond space and time, who's an always vain, all-powerful, fun-loving, and then you have a self-insert agent who is none of those things. Together, they're codependent. So, but constantly having these scenarios where they end up pitting themselves against each other, one torments the other, usually one-sided, or seeing things go for the turnabouts. You end up you get a best of both worlds scenario. You get the TF, of course, which is very important for these circumstances, but you also get a sense of camaraderie. You feel like that these people have adventures outside of the stories when we're not even writing anything about it. Like, this is just a regular day thing for them. This is what's happening. This is what we're planning on. Happen, and it will continue to happen until the near future, until the heat death of the universe.
I think to piggyback off of what Derek was saying earlier about sometimes you don't need to focus on really deep, intricate characters. I've also dabbled in that. A lot of my stories are second person because I think it's quite an interesting and underused perspective to write from. And so there's not much characterization there because it's relying on the reader filling in the gaps themselves. And kind of with that, I can just kind of jump right into the action if I want to. So I don't have to start the story talking about how you brushed your teeth in the morning, you got up and you had breakfast, and then oops, you're a donkey or something. You can just get right into the action.
Yes,
and I think
totally
that's really powerful. really grabs the reader's attention, but also just pushes you right into the mindset you want to be in. I think that can work equally as well as having a well-developed character. And like Derek said, I think the character can actually come out over time as that short scene is unfolding. It can kind of come out naturally. So in one way, it negates the need for a lot of exposition, and it's also, I don't know, it's more direct, and I like it a lot. It's one of my favorite ways to write, and I need to do more of it.
One of the questions I'm seeing a lot popping up in the chat right now is about writing post TF, and how much time do we want to dedicate to before and after, and any advice for writing post transformation things. Personally, I really like writing post transformation because it kind of lets you kind of get into the mind of the person. Because it's kind of an alien experience, as we've kind of chatted about here before. That the kind of seeing the perspective from a different point of view, which I guess is the same thing, actually. I don't know why I just said that. But yeah, I would ultimately say that writing post transformation involves a lot of character, because sometimes you can write a post transformation story without even talking about the original transformation. It's like waking up, it's like boom, something is different about this person than they were the night before. But yeah, does anybody else have any perspectives on post TF stuff?
I mean, heck, I think post TF is why I got into writing in the first place. Because, I mean, there is a lot of fun to be had in writing the process of TF. And I'm sure a lot of people have had fun with writing that. But, like, a lot of things, what happened was, since I really liked exploration of a new form, this is going to sound crazy, I skipped past all of the transformation part of the story to the end to see if there was anything about them being in the new form.
Yes.
And then I would find like one little paragraph of like, well, I guess they're a dog now. And then the story would end. I'm like, wait, no, come back. I want to know what happened next. No. Kind of deal. Which in turn, that's what eventually caused me to be like, gosh, I want to write more with that kind of deal. Like, I remember being so frustrated by like an otter TF, and it did no focus on the fun of being an otter or the swooping about an otter or the swimming an otter. It was very clinical and it ended immediately. I'm like, no, wait, the good part. And so I had to write an entire story that focused on the idea of being an otter and how someone would deal with that. And also the magic of swimming as an otter and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot to be mined in post TF kind of deal, especially in writing, I think, kind of deal. Like, and like, not to discount like the transformation process, which, yeah, but yeah, I would say there's like a lot of value on the after effect too.
I think for me, kind of world building takes a huge point in post TF, just because I like to kind of envision how the world might see somebody TFing. Like, is it in a modern day and nobody knows what you were before? Is it a setting where people do transform regularly? Like, how are you going to integrate your new form in that world? Um, and like, kind of, where does it go forward? Like, where do you fit in? Or are you an animal? Do you fit in as we treat animals now? Just sort of those thoughts.
Kind of like to. I kind of like to focus on things. I'm sure you've ended up hearing about the phrase inside improv comedy known as "yes and," where we end up where
Yeah.
okay, yes, something ends up happening right there. We'll say somebody turns into Fox. Okay, great. Now what? How do people react? How do they react? How does their life end up progressing right there? I mentioned before the circumstances, whether or not there is a way to turn back, or if they even want to, or if something else ends up happening, or if there's an entirely different antagonistic force out there too.
I think for me, for post TF, I don't know if Derek maybe has the same kind of thoughts on it as I do, but for me, it's like my writing is a lot of kink focus, and so a lot of the post TF kind of doubles down on the kinks that I've introduced into the story at that point.
Mhm.
with like mind control or the occasional vor that I might write. I don't know. But I guess for me, the post TF experience is, yeah, oh, now you're a mind controlled donkey clone of this big donkey guy. Aha, now this is your life now, kind of thing. That's where my kind of thoughts go to post TF. Less about the general experience of being the animal, I guess, which is also valid. I just don't think it fits my particular the way I write, I guess. But you are right. I think it was Gio that said the writing has a great way of really expanding on that stuff. Maybe more so than like art, I guess. Like we can go into a lot more detail. You can see inside the character's head a lot better.
Yes.
You know, see their thoughts and stuff like that. It's a
Yeah.
lot more intimate.
Being inside the head is the most fun part. And I will say, I think I am kind of different from you in this. Having read a lot of your stories, the great stories, by the way,
Thank you.
you do tend to end. You don't, from the stories I've read, you don't do post TF as much as maybe some of Geo's stories that I've read.
Yeah.
Which is fine. But I really like post TF as a bondage situation, where the character has now transformed, but their mind is not in line with their body, and they have to kind of reckon with that. It's kind of the same way that a bondage situation would work. And I mean, just in general, that's kind of the way I see TF. If you ever talk to me about TF, I'm gonna say, yeah, it's bondage, because that's kind of what it is to me. And it's fun to think about it that way as well, because then it kind of makes transformation feel like a somewhat more normal kink. We think of it as more of like an out there thing, but from a bondage perspective, it's kind of pretty vanilla, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great perspective there, actually. Like, but it's like playing with like TF. You're out of control of your situation. Like you're out of control of kind of your form, and you have to deal with a whole set of new sensations and new instincts.
Yep.
Or just like some cases in being inanimate, you have to deal with being like treated as what you appear to be, kind of deal, and stuff like that. And with any TF, that's the case though. Kind of deal. But like
Yeah.
the level of control you have and agency you have in a particular form is different, kind of deal. And the expectations of that form is different. And it's really interesting to dig into those aspects and corners of it, kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the bondage analogy is not perfect because, of course, like you mentioned, sometimes you have more power. Sometimes, like, it's a little different.
Yeah. I think in inanimate they could definitely make that parallel there, especially.
Mm.
Yeah, I noticed
It's
a
really
lot
interesting to think about.
of overlap in that with like petrification and like that kind of
Oh.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People just, you know, like what that's like the ultimate of that, being a statue, I suppose.
Yep. That's what it was funny. I never really like understood why people said that transformation was like bondage until I started writing it, and then I was like, oh, like I guess I kind of get bondage now. I understood transformation first, and
It's like a full-scale sensory deprivation, I suppose, except in some ways the exact opposite. I guess it depends. I like looking at the psychological aspects too, like especially for the long term. How exactly would that affect you, right there? Knowing all of a sudden your life was point A, and now all of a sudden it's point B. How is that going to work? And in some cases, if, for example, somebody's a statue left there for quite a long time, possibly even years, hundreds of them maybe, will that end up wearing on somebody? How will they feel?
It's true.
Would they feel?
Pigeons would be apparel.
Almost certainly.
I mean, but I
That's
mean, on
the
that,
ultimate
yeah.
dead end.
I mean, that's the aspect, though. It's like it's kind of fun to play with the perils of any particular form, kind of deal. Like, say someone has a pet cat and they accidentally turn themselves into a mouse, and then they have to deal with the peril of their former pet attempting to eat them, kind of deal.
And it ends up going along with the whole crux of writing in general. There, you could just end up having a chill, You could just end up having a chill slice of life type story, or you can end up having a circumstance as you just described right there, where there's a peril, an antagonistic force of some sort, or somewhere in the middle where there's some force going on that's completely beyond any sort of comprehension, and you just got to deal with it.
Yeah. Like
Let's see.
I mean, there's the funny advantages of a new form. Like if you're a mouse, you can make like a Nutrigrain bar last for like a much longer time. You are set for the week, kind of deal. So,
I
World
mean,
hunger
Saving money
solved.
through TF.
that's honestly my favorite kind of underrated TF trope was the whole rodent punk thing, and then someone getting isekai'd into it by being turned into a mouse. That's my guilty pleasure.
I would love to see more TF Isekai type transformations and things. I tried to write one, but it's kind of beyond me. It's not my style. It'd be better in your style, like Geo or Lappy. I've mentioned like that I prefer sort of delving right into things, but I do really admire the people who like spend the time to like write out the like setup and all that in the aftermath. I would love I would love to see more of that.
so I guess we
I
should
see
probably
a-
talk. Oh, continue.
Oh, I was going to say, I see a lot of people asking about mental changes in the chat.
Yeah.
Ooh.
We can
You
talk
want
about
to
that.
Yeah, that's fun.
segue to that? I guess I might as well start. For me, I like to try to start the mental changes by kind of comparing them to what the person, sort of like comparing, contrasting to like how the person feels about them as they slowly become more natural with the TF. So it's just like, say, if you're turning to your dog, you're like, oh, what's the smell? This smells so fascinating. Like, wait, why am I interested in that? Kind of like that back and forth as it becomes more natural. I think that's just kind of an interesting perspective to like try to look at these instincts or these mental changes from the character's point of view before the character changes, and they just feel natural.
Yeah, I think that's really good. It's something for my work personally, because it's so kink focused, that kind of thing usually takes a little bit of a backseat for the mental changes. For me, because I do a lot of hypnosis stuff, I really love a good like mental internal struggle, and also like the feeling that their humanity is on the line. I guess like they're just shifting back and forth constantly, trying to resist the hypnosis or the transformation, and slowly over time the layers get peeled back. The resistance gets less and less, and then they start to really embrace it towards the end. I think having that, for me, that kind of mental shift, those kind of mental changes, just kind of pinging back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, is really effective. And yeah, if there's character built up as well, you can really play into that as a lot. I guess like we were saying earlier, with like a really proud knight kind of character that hates gnolls, what would they be thinking at the time when they're changing into a gnoll kind of thing? You can really play that up with the mental change, and I think it's really, really good.
Yeah, and we actually did that in the story. We had him slowly start gaining more and more null thoughts. His thoughts started to simplify, and he had like an awareness something was happening, and it was like fun playing with like his like mental thoughts going like starting to become more and more nullish as the story progresses, kind of deal. Trying to retain his self, kind of deal, but as you start to get more and more of that kind of that dopey null mindset, kind of deal,
Yeah.
and trying to find the
Yeah.
balance between the two. Yeah.
Yeah, I see a lot of people in the chat going, minus int plus strength.
Yeah.
Which is, that is the whole point of why I like to write that kind of like null TF thing, because but get that that is a part of the whole mental change thing, where it's basically it's you're not really changing the person, you're changing how the person views the world, which is an interesting way of looking at it, because it's just kind of how would you view the world if you were a 8-foot tall hyena man?
Yeah.
You guys pretty much ended up hitting the nail on the head, I would feel. Took the words right out of my mouth. A lot of times, dealing with the mental changes can be quite fascinating, and I like analyzing that too. uh, but yeah, it can just vary in betweening minor urges that weren't there before, things you might not even notice if you weren't so actively thinking about it, versus full-blown overtaking and whatnot, especially for things like existing characters, media, etc. There, that whole ship of Theseus thing. Callback. But yeah, a
One
lot of
thing
that
that
just spoils. Yeah,
one thing that Gabe mentioned earlier that I want to come back to is changing of what the character wants, possibly against their will. Like they want to, whatever their instincts tell them that they want to do. And it also plays into I tend to be kinky, so characters who thought of themselves as straight and then they have gay desires. It's kind of just
Yes.
I see the same thing
Yeah.
with um, transformation is just kind of overriding what they want rather than the character itself, like themselves. And so they have to grapple with their new desires. That's the way that I personally prefer to do mental changes.
Yeah,
I just want to
that's
expand
good.
on that point. Sorry, um, just to say how, for example, like straight to gay, and I say that in kind of quotation marks, about how empowering it can be, especially for those who have had their sexuality repressed or haven't been allowed to express it in the way to frame it in that point of view of, okay, well, this character is finding some sort of comfort and solace in exploring these new feelings, and it gives people a way to experience that can be very powerful and rewarding. And I guess that kind of goes for TF as a whole too. It just allows us to jump into spaces that we might normally not want to go, and just kind of explore certain aspects of ourselves in ways that are completely unique to the fandom.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off the straight to gay talk because if anyone's read my stories, you probably know that it's a major part of most of my stories. To be honest, kind of just worms its way in automatically without me even thinking. But in tandem with like hypnosis and brainwashing and stuff like that, that's another good mental change that I really like. I think it's I don't know. I just really like it, and as a gay guy myself, I don't know. I'm obviously a bit biased towards it, I suppose, but it's really nice. Yeah, orientation plays really good.
Oh, and if anyone else has anything, there's like something. Well, somebody brought up a thing. I guess we should talk about this part, like it's one major part of TF actually. But someone talked about this in the chat about what's your preference in style and how detailed you write the TF. And
I'll take
like
that.
and like how you play with I guess in turn, like how do you write the TF process kind of deal? We should probably talk a little bit on that kind of deal in the TF writing panel, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it's a weakness of
Should
mine,
we?
so go for it.
Should we go from like A to Z again? Just go through everyone for this.
Yeah, go for it. Agent,
Mhm.
do you have any thoughts on like the TF process on how you go with it
yeah,
kind of deal?
yeah. I could probably discuss that. One thing that artists can end up getting away with more than us writers for something like that is we can't do a poof. We have to be able to describe the process in detail, go through the motions. I just like doing bits and pieces at a time, focusing from the legs up, or sometimes to a specific body part, and moving from there. The whole thing is to just end up doing a progressive. Give the audience something to focus on at one point at a time, and just move from there. It's like, okay, let's focus on the arm, now the chest, now the other arm, and the rest as we go. But you want to make sure that it's you want to make sure it's detailed enough that the audience has a visual to go with it, while simultaneously not going too long-winded, and otherwise you're just retreading old ground and repeating yourself unnecessarily, and that kind of takes them out of the experience as a result.
So I guess I'm next. I will say that I do tend to write some poof TFs. I know that Gio has a thing later, I think, where he's going to discuss Poof TS in detail.
It's true.
But I mean, I see it in all ways. I'm really omnivorous in this perspective, so sometimes I like to really delve into like the changes in a physical sense. Other times, I like to have the character notice the change afterward. Maybe they wake up and they've changed. But level of detail wise, it really depends on the story. I don't think there's any one thing that I like detail wise. I think that overall, I do tend to be less focused on the actual transformation itself, like the physicality right away, and focus more on like afterwards and what the character notices and feels and things. But don't have anything else to say on that. So, Gabe?
I'm actually the exact opposite. I really like writing detailed anatomy. I have a bachelor's and a master's in biology, and I haven't been able to use it for employment, so now I get to. I do like trying to because
That explains.
anatomy
Sorry,
is so.
that explains so much about you. Now that you say that,
Thank you.
your writing makes so much sense to me.
Thank you.
And I love it. By the way, I said I didn't
Oh,
do it
thank you
myself,
so
but I
much.
love that you do it.
Yeah, I actually had recently watched you, so I really enjoy your stuff too. Um, I just want to throw that out. Also, just before I go into my little rant, somebody in the chat said this panel's making me want to start writing. Do it.
Yes,
Do
do
it.
it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I just because like animal, well, at least sort of not even just mammalian anatomy, but vertebrate anatomy. There's just so many similarities, so I like to try to look at different skeletal structures and musculature and just like be like, oh, okay, this is going to be shorter, this is going to be arranged, or this is going to be repurposed. And even largely like invertebrates and stuff like that, there's still developmental structures that come out in very similar ways. So it's easy kind of to translate that into TF. Like when a certain structure is going to become a limb, for example, like it's kind of easy to think, okay, well, it's actually this part of the body that would be pushing out as opposed to, and again, I guess like reverse knees and stuff like that, because you know, most quadrupeds, their knee is actually kind of attached to their belly with a flap of skin. So it's like, so certain leg bones have to be shorter, and you know, each have to like muscles be thinner and muscles pulled more tightly against bones or that sort of thing. But I guess the one aspect I really like with anatomical changes is like taking a step back between like each major thing and um, kind of taking a peek into the character's mind and seeing how they feel about it. Like if it's an unwilling change, oh no, my hands are hooves, I can't interact with the world anymore, or oh no, I have a tail, this beastly appendage that no human has, that sort of thing. So it's just it sort of breaks up the very technical manual aspect of describing a physical change a little bit, and also helps get people into a narrative. Like I think Agent was saying, you don't want to take people out of the narrative. You want to keep it engaging, and just sort of that bit of introspection I find really helps segue between different parts of the change. And I think Geo's up next. Yeah, Geo's up next.
Okay, fun. My main weakness is is writing the transformation process. But I get a little stylistic, I get a little vague kind of deal because it's like because I love playing with like the aftermath kind of deal. So, but like if I have usually leaned on Lappy of how do we do this transition part, but there's fun little turns of phrase and like bits and pieces you can add in of like highlighting the new parts of the form and the new aspects of the form as they come into it kind of deal. Like for instance, I have to write a story a bit like I have to figure like, okay, someone had to be turned into like a plush Roo And I was like, and it was done via nanobots. And I was like, what'd be funny is if there was like a holographic needle and thread that went through the character and shifted him into this plush form. Kind of deal. Even though he's being changed by nanobots that can't be seen, I was like, I thought it'd be a fun visual way to show it in the story, kind of deal. And like, but like that, since I am not as much into the process, I find it kind of fun narrative ways to kind of play with it, kind of deal. And what is interesting to me, what I think seems like an interesting way to get from point A to point B with this character, kind of deal. But a lot of my stories, I admit, it does
So
depend on Poof TF. It's like instant there, kind of deal.
yeah, that ends up being a good point. It's like a unreliable narrative of sort, or to an extent.
Like how much is what are they experiencing? What are they seeing from the perspective, kind of deal?
Exactly.
Yeah, I tend to kind of view the writing. I mean, you know, we're talking about like where to start with. I'm big on tail explosions or haunch explosions, whatever is in that lower back area. It's gotta go. But you know, I find that a lot of times, given that I write things that are uh, not analogous to people, a lot of the time, it's usually I usually start off in the whole mental aspect, like how someone feels about something as they are not doing it. And then another part of the thing that is interesting about that whole thing is kind of figuring out what parts of the human body are analogous to parts of machines or things that are, you know, you wouldn't find, you know, like I think some people in the chat were talking about like octopi have 8 limbs, you know, how would that feel? I mean, you know, and you know, like automobiles are technically quadrupeds if you think about it.
That's great.
I don't know how I feel.
Can I just throw a quick thing in about octopi? They do have 8 limbs, but they do not come out where you expect.
Oh, weird.
Especially
Okay,
squids. Squid are
interesting.
actually functionally upside down compared to us, and as well as snails. So it's like it's interesting to like think of it from that perspective. It's like technically the tentacles would come out of the chin, and the rest of your body is up above the head. It's actually kind of really
Oh,
cool to
wild.
visualize.
Wow. See, this is why we do this stuff. So that when we write octopus TF, we can have them come out of the top of the head.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no.
For those very
Oh,
general and
no.
well often written TFs.
Yeah. Also, it's by a small note, it appears we only have about 5 minutes left, it appears. So
Oh no.
Yeah.
but well,
Um,
let's get Squeaky's opinions on the whole thing though,
Yeah.
maybe, and then we can
Yeah.
go from there.
I'll summarize my thoughts quite quickly. I saw someone related to this. I saw someone in the chat asking about suit TFs, which again, if anyone's read like my stuff, that's a big part of what I do as well. So I guess for a two birds one stone kind of thing, I like suit TFs. And a lot of the focus of my TFs, again, I think someone mentioned the mental aspect, but I also kind of ping pong between the mental aspect and also the physical. And because I write a lot of rubber suits, latex, symbiotes kind of stuff, it's a lot more about how the material feels like crawling up the person's body, like how ice cold it is on the skin or how warm it is, how it wraps around the muscles, how it like reshapes the hands into paws, how it like envelops their head or something like that. I think a lot of sensory detail with that is really good and really important to make the reader feel engaged. Definitely, that's where I like to focus. I also wanted to quickly backpedal, like just for 2 seconds, to the question about negative feedback with your writing. I know that was a long time ago, but in my experience, one of the worst ones I had was someone made an entire podcast talking about one of my stories.
Oh, I saw that.
Oh.
I wrote a Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Twine game, which had a lot of TF in it, and someone made an entire podcast talking about how weird and disgusting and like creepy it was. So
No.
that's
The
interesting.
podcast was more cringe than your story was.
Oof.
Absolutely.
That's
It
good
was.
to know.
Oh,
Thank
look at
you.
the story now. It sounds amazing.
it's that was my experience. It's probably the worst experience I've had, other than in my previous like writing endeavors, people telling me to go do funny things with bad objects kind of thing. Just they're not very happy with me in some spaces. But what are you gonna do?
I think I forgot to mention earlier. I got one. I had posted a tax season is coming up. I have stories in that. And somebody posted on it. Your work's not very good. And I'm like, I wish I had thought of it at the moment, but I'm just like, thank you for reading. I did.
I do that a lot.
Response, honestly, actually,
Hindsight
yeah.
is 2020.
Yeah.
It's like, how did you get
I
here?
always, yeah. Just thanks for reading, and thank you for commenting so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to give me support.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Actually, we need
We're
to,
being shuffled
view
off
on the counter.
stage.
we need to wrap up in 2 minutes. Okay,
Well,
any final thoughts?
2 minutes.
I think yeah.
If any of you guys want to ask any questions to me, and I mentioned other people out writing, will be around the whole weekend. So feel free to ask any questions, and I'll answer them. And yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of amazing questions. I saw so many go by. We didn't have time for all of them, but gosh, there were so many good ones I wanted to hit up. But God, thank you for asking them, and thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's really
if
good.
anyone wants to DM me, feel free. I will try to answer as many questions as I can.
Yeah, and we all have
there was a lot of really good
stuff,
questions.
yeah.
Yeah.
Best way to start writing is to start writing.
True,
Right.
true.
Do it.
If you don't want a
Yeah.
message, you can always just start writing. Idea, consider it.
Yeah.
I'll be watching the posts on Fur Affinity.
It's true.
I know. I will see
Take
it.
care, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
also-
Nice talking to all of you, by the way.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
lovely talking with
Yeah,
all
it
you.
was
Nice
a really
to meet
good
all you
chat.
and talk.
A pleasure, everyone.
To the person in chat who said TF everyone with the morphogenetic field, why? Why? I just played Zero Escape. Why? Anyway, thanks all. This was really good. It was really fun.
Yeah.
And
Another
thank
thing,
you
I
for
come in
watching,
here.
everyone.
I guess we need to escape off, or
Yep.
I guess we should
Goodbye.
shoot off. But yeah,
All right.
y'all have a
Bye.
good one. Talk to y'all. See y'all around later. Have a good one.